Imagine being trapped under tons of snow, every second crushing your chest, every breath a battle between life and suffocation. Darkness surrounds, silence presses in, and the cold gnaws at every inch of your body. You can't move, you can barely breathe, and hope feels like a distant memory. But somewhere, deep inside, a spark refuses to die, a spark that drives you to fight against impossible odds, to claw for air, to survive when every instinct screams that it's over. This is not just a story of snow and ice. It's a story of raw human will, resilience, and the unrelenting fight to breathe again. The mountain's roar began as a low, distant rumble, almost imperceptible at first, like the subtle growl of a predator lying in wait. The snow above shifted with a subtle tremor, an almost inaudible whisper of movement that hinted at the immense weight pressing down from the peaks. It was a sound that could have been ignored, a background vibration beneath the usual creaks and groans of the mountainside. Yet instinct caught the attention, a signal deep in the body that something was terribly wrong. There was no time to interpret it fully before the world changed in an instant. A thunderous crash erupted, shaking the mountain like it had been struck by some colossal force. Snow surged downward in an unstoppable wave, pulverizing trees, rocks, and anything unfortunate enough to be caught in its path. The ground trembled, shaking loose stones and dislodging boulders as if the earth itself were in pain. The air was filled with a deafening roar, an endless white noise that drowned out every other sound: laughter, birds, wind. All became irrelevant, non-existent. In moments, the snow transformed the familiar landscape into a chaotic, shifting wall of ice, a prison of white that advanced with terrifying speed. The avalanche engulfed everything without discrimination. Branches snapped like twigs, jagged rocks were swept aside, and the snow hit like a tidal wave, a merciless force that pressed and pounded. The temperature plummeted instantly, and the air became thick with powder, sharp and biting, invading every gap and crevice. Breathing was suddenly a conscious, impossible task, the lungs straining against the heavy particles that filled the space, each inhale a battle against suffocating resistance. Panic rose, raw and immediate, fueled by the instinctual knowledge that the very air could vanish in an instant. Time fractured. Seconds stretched into eternities as the descent continued, a blur of white and ice. The body was thrown into disorientation, senses assaulted from all directions. The roar of the snow was accompanied by a constant grinding and cracking of the frozen mass, the avalanche reshaping the environment into something alien and hostile. Visibility was reduced to nothing. The world had become a single, pressing sheet of white. It wasn't darkness yet, but it was a visual void, a space where depth and distance ceased to exist. Every movement was instinctive, flailing against an unfeeling force that respected neither strength nor skill. The sensation of falling, or being buried alive, was surreal. The body was no longer tethered to familiar points of reference. Up and down became meaningless concepts. Limbs flailed against the crushing snow, trying to resist, but the snow moved with an inexorable rhythm, a weight that could not be countered. Panic was immediate, primal, but alongside it emerged a sharp clarity. The brain, stripped of distractions, focused entirely on one task: survival. It was a fight not just of strength, but of mental acuity, a need to calculate and conserve energy while simultaneously seeking an improbable path to escape. The snow pressed harder with every second. It was more than a mere covering. It was a living, breathing force that suffocated with patient inevitability. The chest tightened, every breath demanding effort, a conscious calculation of how much could be taken without succumbing to the icy trap. The tactile world disappeared, replaced by the cold bite of compressed snow against skin and clothing, the friction of particles grinding together in a constant, oppressive mass. Even sound had been transformed. There was no distinct noise anymore, only a continuous, oppressive vibration in the bones, a pressure that seemed to communicate the mountain's indifference to life. Instincts sharpened. Every subtle shift of snow, every hollow resonance through the chest, was registered and interpreted. Small movements became monumental decisions. A twitch of a finger, a roll of the wrist, a flex of the ankle. The body sought air pockets, weak points in the dense white, the tiniest hint of space that might allow a gulp of oxygen. Each moment carried a balance between hope and futility. It was a world without mercy, where mistakes were fatal and every fraction of strength mattered. The mind tried to reconcile what was happening with past experiences, but the avalanche ignored logic. Memories of mountains in calm, sunny weather, of treks along safe paths, were replaced by an immediate confrontation with primal terror. The body could not comprehend the scale of destruction, only feel the weight pressing, hear the constant roar, and sense the life, threatening compression surrounding it. Every instinct screamed to move, to fight, to survive, but the environment mocked these efforts, offering resistance at every turn. Air became precious. Each breath was a battle against suffocation, lungs expanding against icy resistance, mouth filling with fine powder that burned and choked. The body's normal rhythms were thrown into chaos, heart racing, blood coursing through veins like liquid fire, muscles trembling under stress. Survival became a negotiation between physical endurance and sheer mental determination. It was not a battle that could be fought recklessly. Every movement required calculation, every inhalation measured. The mountain did not care, only the ability to endure mattered. Even as the snow buried everything familiar, there was an unspoken recognition of fragility. Life existed in the spaces between the crushing weight, in fleeting moments where movement could create tiny pockets of air. The body adjusted, muscles tensing and relaxing in an unconscious pattern, finding micro opportunities to survive. The mind clung to awareness, refusing to succumb entirely to panic, balancing terror with strategy. It was an intimate dance with mortality, every heartbeat echoing the fragility of existence under immense pressure. In those first minutes, the mountain had already claimed dominance. It had transformed the world into a landscape where survival was not guaranteed, where instinct, calculation, and raw endurance were the only allies. There was no audience, no help, no mercy, only the relentless, suffocating weight of the avalanche and the urgent need to breathe, to remain conscious, to cling to life in a place designed to erase it. Time had no meaning in this frozen tomb. The roar of the snow became the only constant, a sound that vibrated through bones and mind alike. Each movement was laborious, each breath was precious. Survival was reduced to the most fundamental acts: inhale, exhale, resist, adapt. Every muscle, every nerve, every spark of consciousness was devoted entirely to a single purpose: living through the white chaos that threatened to consume completely. The mountain's silence returned gradually, not as relief, but as an eerie, oppressive reminder that it could return at any moment. The roar faded into a heavy, suffocating stillness, punctuated only by the shifting of snow and the desperate rhythm of the lungs. Darkness pressed in as the snow settled, the roar replaced by a heavy quiet that was no less terrifying. The world had been reduced to a cold, white coffin, and every instinct screamed to fight against the crushing weight, to find air, to find life. Even in that suffocating silence, there was a spark, a raw, primal insistence that survival was possible. The body, though battered and struggling, responded. Small adjustments, careful movements, the subtle flexing of limbs, all became strategies in a fight against annihilation. The avalanche had imposed its will, but within its cold grasp, the faint possibility of life persisted, fragile yet undeniable. Breath, movement, awareness, these were everything. The snow pressed with merciless weight, yet survival became a negotiation with the environment, a test of endurance, mental fortitude, and instinct. The mountain had roared and silenced, crushed and buried, but within that frozen tomb, the pulse of life endured, fragile, desperate, and fiercely insistent. The snow was not just cold, it was suffocating. Every particle pressed against the body, a dense, unyielding weight that seemed alive, intent on crushing all resistance. It wasn't a gentle covering, the kind that softens the fall or cushions the body. It was a relentless force, compacting the world into a frozen tomb. Limbs were pinned, movements restricted to tiny, desperate shifts. Each breath became an ordeal, as if the lungs were drawing through a narrow, frozen straw. The chest expanded with tremendous effort, only to contract again under the icy grip of the avalanche, and every inhale carried shards of snow that bit and burned. Darkness surrounded everything. It was a darkness that wasn't merely the absence of light. It was a physical presence, pressing on skin and bones, reducing perception to touch, sound, and the faintest flicker of consciousness. The world had become impossibly small, compressed into a suffocating cocoon where every movement mattered. Panic rose instinctively, sharp and immediate, but even as the mind screamed, the body's instinct for survival asserted control. Breath after breath, movement after movement, life was negotiated in infinitesimal increments. The air pockets were minimal, barely enough to sustain a single lungful. Each inhalation was a calculated act, measured and careful, a balance between desire and necessity. The snow intruded mercilessly, filling any space where oxygen could exist. Even the slightest effort to expand the chest was met with crushing resistance. Every second carried an urgent question. How long could this body endure before the air supply dwindled, before the cold and weight combined into something irreversible? The cold itself was an enemy. It seeped into the bones, making muscles stiff, slowing reflexes. Fingers and toes went numb quickly, losing the ability to respond, to grasp, to claw. The body shivered involuntarily, muscles convulsing in an attempt to generate warmth. Yet warmth was fleeting, swallowed instantly by the unrelenting freeze. Skin burned where it was exposed to the snow, even through layers of clothing. Every sensation was amplified: the sting of cold, the rasp of snow in the throat, the crushing pressure pressing from every side. Time lost meaning. Seconds stretched and contracted unpredictably, each moment both fleeting and eternal. The mind attempted to comprehend the situation, but comprehension was a luxury. Awareness became a sequence of survival, focused observations, a slight movement in the snow, the faintest air pocket, the rhythm of the heart, and the shallow gasps of lungs. Thoughts of safety or danger, past or future, were reduced to one overarching focus: how to survive this instant and the next. The snow shifted around the body with a slow, grinding persistence. It was not a static weight. It moved subtly, responding to every twitch, every involuntary spasm. Each shift could be a threat or a tiny advantage, a movement that might create a fraction of extra space. Fingers flexed and toes pressed against the cold, searching for any pocket of air or weak point in the dense mass. Limbs were tiny instruments of negotiation with the snow, testing, probing, and adapting to its immense, oppressive force. Sound had transformed into a muffled, vibrating hum, a constant low-frequency vibration that pressed against the chest and head. There were no distinct noises, no wind, no cracking branches, no distant echoes of the outside world. Every sound, including the desperate rasping of the own breath, was filtered through layers of ice and snow. The body listened intently, attuned to the subtle changes in pressure or vibration that could signal movement of the snow or the existence of air pockets. Panic and focus existed simultaneously, twisting together in a strange, intense fusion. Fear was present, raw and immediate, but it was tempered by the sharp edge of instinct. Every muscle was engaged in a delicate balance. Conserve energy, but act where possible. Breathe carefully, but seek air actively. Remain still when necessary, but shift when required. The snow was an indifferent adversary, and survival depended entirely on understanding its patterns, responding to its subtle cues, and never relinquishing the determination to endure. The darkness pressed harder as the snow settled. It was not complete blackness, but a confined, oppressive white that pressed against every sense. Awareness of the body's own limitations became unavoidable. Muscles cramped from constrained positions, limbs went numb, and joints ached under pressure. Tiny scratches and abrasions from the shifting ice and snow stung, yet they were secondary concerns compared to the constant battle for air. Every sensation was amplified, and the body interpreted them as urgent warnings, signs of danger that had to be addressed, even with limited ability to move. Breath was a battlefield. Snow invaded the mouth and nostrils with every effort to inhale, burning the throat and lungs. Each exhale carried a mix of carbon dioxide and tiny ice particles, the body desperately trying to clear space, to make room for oxygen, but the snow relentlessly filled every cavity. Lungs expanded and contracted with painstaking effort, and the smallest motion of the chest had to be calculated to prevent collapse. The body became a machine of precision, each action aimed at survival, each inhale a carefully measured negotiation with the frozen mass surrounding it. The mind alternated between clarity and haze. Fear sharpened focus, compelling the body to act in ways that instinct alone could not dictate. Yet exhaustion threatened constantly, a creeping heaviness that dulled thoughts and slowed reflexes. Awareness was a precious commodity, and it had to be preserved for survival, each moment requiring mental calculation as well as physical exertion. The avalanche had stripped the world to its rawest form: pressure, cold, suffocation, and the unrelenting need to endure. Every tiny air pocket became a treasure. Fingers shifted, chest flexed, and head turned slightly, each movement executed with the hope of maintaining access to breathe. Survival was no longer about movement in a larger space. It was about managing the infinitesimal, about stretching the possibilities of a tiny, frozen prison into a space where life could continue. The body responded with precision. Muscles and nerves coordinated in silent, unconscious partnership with instinct. The snow, unfeeling and omnipresent, tested every limit. It pressed, shifted, ground against every part of the body, and yet within this unyielding weight, there was a faint, almost imperceptible allowance for survival. Life persisted in these infinitesimal spaces, in the pockets of air and subtle movements. The struggle was not just physical, it was a battle of perception, of maintaining consciousness and awareness, of refusing to let fear and suffocation collapse the fragile grip on existence. Even in this crushing confinement, the body refused to surrender. Tiny adjustments, slight movements, careful inhalations, All became lifelines. The snow may have buried the familiar world, but life endured in the space between the frozen particles, in the calculated flex of a muscle, the careful expansion of lungs, and the unyielding insistence of consciousness. The struggle was raw, immediate, and relentless, a test of endurance against a force that respected nothing but the ability to survive. The weight of the snow, the absence of sound, the oppression of darkness, and the sharp bite of cold combined to create a reality reduced to a single, urgent focus: breathe, survive, adapt. The body, though battered, responded with remarkable precision. Each moment carried a question of life or death, and the mind and muscles answered with an unrelenting drive to endure. The avalanche had transformed the world into a suffocating prison, but even in this frozen tomb, survival remained possible through determination, instinct, and the relentless pursuit of air. Memories emerged unbidden, flickering through consciousness like fragile flames against the oppressive cold. They were fragmented shards of warmth and light that contrasted sharply with the crushing weight of snow surrounding the body. A laugh, faint but unmistakable, echoed from a distant past. The sound was not really there. It was conjured by the mind, a desperate attempt to cling to familiarity. It carried a sweetness that seemed impossible in the frozen tomb, a reminder that the world beyond the avalanche had once been full of color, sound, and life. Another memory surfaced: sunlight spilling across a slope, golden and gentle, warming skin and chasing away the chill of early morning. That warmth seemed a distant luxury now, a phantom sensation that teased the body with its absence. Muscles, stiff and numb from the snow's relentless pressure, remembered movement in open spaces, the ease of walking, running, even climbing without the constant, suffocating weight pressing down. The contrast was stark, unbearable, and yet the mind clung to these memories as lifelines, faint signals that survival was possible and worth fighting for. A fleeting glimpse of a familiar place, a winding trail between snow-covered peaks, flashed into consciousness. It existed only as a mental image now, yet it provided clarity amid chaos. The body, trapped in a frozen coffin, responded to these memories unconsciously. Fingers flexed slightly, chest shifted minutely, seeking even the tiniest reprieve, guided by instinct sharpened through recollection. The mind clung to these images not out of nostalgia, but as tools for endurance, using memory to navigate the suffocating present. The avalanche had erased the immediate world, but it could not erase the past. Sensory recollections, smells, sounds, the feel of the wind against skin, emerged unbidden, a subtle reminder that life existed beyond the pressing snow. These recollections were fleeting, fragile, but their impact was profound. They injected energy into the muscles, even in their frozen state, and created an almost imperceptible sense of agency. The body was constrained, but the mind could move freely, wandering through remembered landscapes, finding strength in continuity, in life that had not yet been extinguished. The laughter that appeared in memory was joined by others' voices that had once been companions, the hum of daily life, the distant rush of water in a stream, the creak of wood under bare feet. Each sound, though absent from reality, was amplified by the mind, a potent balm against the isolation imposed by snow and darkness. The body responded instinctively, muscles tensing and relaxing in time with imagined movements. It was as if the memories themselves provided tiny increments of life, fragments of energy to be harnessed in the desperate fight to breathe. The mind began to layer these recollections, forming intricate mosaics of the past. A gust of imagined wind carried the smell of pine and cold earth. A remembered sunbeam reflected against snow that no longer existed. The taste of water, crisp and fresh, lingered on the tongue. These sensory memories were more than comfort, they became strategies for endurance. In a situation where physical senses were limited, the mind relied on the remembered world to maintain alertness, to preserve focus on the minutiae of survival. The shift of snow, the scarce air pockets, the flecks of frozen limbs. Time itself seemed to respond to memory. Each recollection created breaks from the present agony, a pause that allowed the body to adjust and recalibrate. Lungs heaved with careful effort, fingers tested the surrounding snow for tiny shifts, and the mind rehearsed possibilities, all guided by echoes of the past. Memory became a tool, an anchor, and a reminder that life was not confined to the crushing snow. It existed beyond, waiting, a destination worth every agonizing breath. The contrast between the remembered warmth and the present, cold, sharpened awareness. Numb limbs and aching muscles were juxtaposed against remembered freedom of motion, creating a tension that fueled action. Even in the impossibly confined space, the body found ways to shift minutely, guided by instinct but reinforced by mental recollections. Each inhalation, each subtle movement, was reinforced by the vision of open air, sunlight, and the tactile knowledge of movement unimpeded by weight or cold. Memory also served as motivation in the face of fear. Panic was constant, a roaring undertone beneath every breath, every flexing muscle, every calculation. Yet recollections provided perspective, a reminder of the value of persistence. The mind could see the outside world vividly, could remember its colors, its textures, its sounds, and in doing so, maintained a connection to a reality that the snow sought to erase. The body, in turn, responded by optimizing energy expenditure, preserving strength for critical movements, stretching the thin line between suffocation and survival. Even trivial details became vital. The mind recalled the sound of a crackling fire, the sensation of warm water on cold skin, the comforting weight of a blanket. Survival at fuel, abandoned in the name of survival, reminders that comfort and warmth existed, that they were possible again if endurance held. The snow pressed, the cold gnawed, and the lungs ached, but each memory acted like a spark, igniting a flicker of determination in the body's exhausted framework. At times, the memories were painfully ironic. They reminded of ease and abundance, while the present reality offered only restriction and danger. Yet this juxtaposition was not paralyzing. It was galvanizing. The mind translated longing into strategy, using recollections to inform the search for air pockets, the subtle adjustments of frozen limbs, and the careful timing of breaths. Each memory was converted into energy, each recollection a tool for negotiation with a hostile environment. The avalanche had reduced the world to snow, weight, and cold, but memory provided the bridge to continuity, a fragile yet persistent assertion that existence extended beyond the frozen tomb. Recollections of warmth, light, and sound reinforced the body's determination to endure, to resist panic, and to act with precision even when every movement was met with resistance. Memory became both shield and sword, a defense against despair and a weapon to carve out space for breath. The mind began to weave memories into sequences, imagining escape routes, air pockets, and shifts in snow that could create openings. Though these were speculative, they were guided by the body's instinctive feedback, allowing subtle, careful movements to be directed with purpose. Memory was no longer just nostalgia. It was a critical tool in survival, a way to maintain focus and guide action amid chaos and compression. Even the smallest memory could shift the trajectory of endurance. A remembered glimmer of light, a sound of flowing water, or the feel of snow under bare feet provided context, a mental map in a world otherwise reduced to suffocating white. Every recollection reinforced the understanding that life persisted, that the current prison of snow was temporary if determination and strategy could be maintained. As the snow pressed relentlessly, lungs burning and muscles numbing, memory became a companion in isolation, a force to counter the avalanche's intent. Each image, sound, and sensation drawn from the past strengthened the will to breathe, to move, and to survive. The body and mind operated as one unit, guided by instinct, reinforced by recollection, negotiating the fine line between suffocation and life. Memories flickered endlessly, forming an intricate lattice of resilience. Each recall carried with it an unspoken command: endure, adapt, and persist. The snow may have buried the landscape, erased the familiar, and threatened existence itself, but within the mind's eye, a world of warmth, light, and movement persisted. Survival became a delicate balance between the crushing present and the sustaining past, a continuous negotiation powered by the vivid spark of memory against the cold, unyielding weight of avalanche. Every breath became a battle. The snow that surrounded, compressed, and immobilized the body allowed only the faintest whispers of air to pass into the lungs, each inhale a monumental effort. It was not simply cold. It was sharp, invasive, cutting into the throat and chest, carrying tiny granules of ice that burned as they scraped past sensitive tissue. The chest expanded reluctantly, muscles straining under the combined weight of compression and frost. Exhaling was no relief, for the icy confinement seemed to reclaim every atom of air expelled, leaving only the relentless challenge to draw another shallow breath. Movement was instinctual but measured. Limbs were trapped within a frozen tomb, yet even the tiniest twitch could make the difference between survival and suffocation. Fingers flexed against solidified snow, toes shifted imperceptibly, all in search of fragile pockets of air. Each motion required calculation. Energy had to be conserved for essential survival, yet action could not be abandoned entirely. The body learned quickly to adapt, responding to the subtle shifts in the snow as though it were alive, a sentient adversary constantly testing endurance and awareness. The cold was merciless. It seeped into every joint, every tendon, and even the core seemed to shiver involuntarily. The extremities went numb quickly, depriving the body of precision, yet reflexive muscle contractions continued despite the chill. The body generated what little heat it could through small, careful movements, wiggling toes, flexing fingers, rolling shoulders. But each motion had to be balanced against the risk of exhausting limited energy reserves. Cold was a relentless thief, stealing sensation, strength, and patience, leaving only the bare framework of survival behind. Air was everything: tiny shifts in posture, the rotation of the chest, the angle of the head. All became deliberate tactics to maximize intake. Breaths were short, controlled, and carefully timed to preserve oxygen. The snow's density made inhalation a conscious effort. It was not merely pulling air into the lungs, but negotiating with the frozen mass surrounding them. Any sudden or forceful movement risked inhaling snow, choking, and forcing the body closer to unconsciousness. Each moment required calculation, each decision critical, a delicate balance between action and endurance. Pressure pressed from every side. The snow above acted like a living weight, pressing against the chest, shoulders, and limbs, an unrelenting force indifferent to pain or desperation. The body became a conduit of tension, every muscle engaged to resist the invisible but crushing force. Even the spine, under unnatural compression, reacted with micro adjustments, twisting minutely to relieve pressure and optimize breathing. Survival became a symphony of small, precise movements, executed with conscious awareness and guided by the instincts of a body honed to fight for its own life. Time blurred into a continuous struggle. Seconds stretched into minutes, minutes into eternities. The avalanche had erased external reference points. There was no sun, no horizon, only the white prison pressing inward. The body responded to this distorted perception with acute focus, amplifying sensitivity to micro changes in snow density, temperature, and air pockets. The mind, although taxed, remained sharp, analyzing, predicting, and directing movement in a silent dialogue with instinct. Panic was present but channeled into hyper-awareness, sharpening rather than consuming. The snow shifted imperceptibly with every breath, every subtle motion of limbs. Tiny pockets of air formed and collapsed, offering brief surges of oxygen that had to be seized immediately. The body learned to sense these variations instinctively. The faint pressure against the chest indicated a loosening of snow above. The smallest vibration hinted at an air cavity nearby. Every flex of the hands and toes was part of a meticulous negotiation with the avalanche, a test of endurance, perception, and precision. Even the sound environment had transformed. The outside world, once full of echoes and movement, had been replaced by a deep, low hum of vibrating snow. Each breath, cough, and shift echoed faintly, reverberating through the frozen confines. The body listened constantly, translating these vibrations into actionable information where air pockets might exist, where the snow was loosening, where even the slightest opportunity to move might present itself. Awareness became a survival tool, sharpening all senses to an almost unbearable degree. Instinct took command. Logical thought existed only to support survival, all other considerations stripped away. Fear, though omnipresent, was transformed into a driving force, compelling careful experimentation with movement, testing limits without overexertion. Every muscle, every joint, every nerve worked in concert, guided by a silent understanding. Survival depended on measured action and relentless focus. Each inhale, each subtle adjustment, was a negotiation with an indifferent, unyielding environment that offered nothing willingly. The body developed subtle strategies in response to the suffocating snow. Tiny rotations of the torso, controlled flexing of limbs, and deliberate tilts of the head allowed the lungs to expand incrementally, maximizing each fragile breath. The mind reinforced these adaptations, anticipating pressure changes and guiding micro movements in a continuous loop of awareness and action. Even exhaustion, when it threatened, was countered with instinctual pacing, preserving just enough energy to respond to the next critical opportunity for air or movement. Cold, darkness, and compression combined to create a sensory landscape of extreme awareness. The body perceived every subtle shift, every temperature change, every vibration in the snow. Tiny air pockets became precious havens, exploited with deliberate care. The chest expanded and contracted with painstaking control, maximizing oxygen extraction from each inhale, while the body minimized unnecessary movement to conserve energy. Survival was a negotiation of physics and biology, instinct and awareness, a continuous interaction with the crushing environment. Each breath carried consequences. Overexertion could lead to collapse, underexertion to suffocation. The body had to synchronize movement with the availability of air, with the subtle shifts of the snow, with its own dwindling reserves of strength. Muscles burned from exertion, but energy had to be conserved. The cold threatened to steal every ounce of warmth generated. Every inhale was a calculated act, every exhale a measured release, all executed under the constant, unyielding weight of ice. The mind remained a fragile but vital partner in survival. It maintained focus, assessed options, and reinforced the body's instincts. Memories, past experiences, and knowledge of breathing and movement provided additional tools to endure the suffocating environment. Conscious thought directed adjustments, guided timing of breaths, and informed subtle shifts in posture, all while fear, cold, and pressure threatened to overwhelm awareness. Survival became a fusion of body and mind, instinct and calculation, each amplifying the other's capacity to endure. Time, senses, and energy converged into a singular mission: maintain life. Every movement was deliberate, every breath precious, every adjustment purposeful. The avalanche, relentless and indifferent, pressed in all directions, but even in this confined, suffocating tomb, the body and mind responded with coordinated resilience. Each second, though grueling, offered an opportunity to persist, to adapt, to survive. Even exhaustion was transformed into strategy. Pauses, controlled shivers, and slight contractions conserved energy while maximizing warmth and oxygen use. Awareness of every detail, snow density, vibration, air pocket availability became a lifeline. The body moved with deliberate precision, guided by instinct, reinforced by mental calculation, negotiating the unyielding confines of frozen pressure. Every inhalation was a small victory, every subtle movement a step toward continued existence. The snow was vast, unfeeling, and absolute, yet survival persisted within the infinitesimal spaces created by breath, movement, and awareness. The body and mind, despite fatigue and frost, worked as a seamless system, each action, each adjustment, a negotiation against the avalanche that sought to erase everything. Even as the crushing weight of snow pressed from every side, lungs burning and muscles trembling, the body continued its relentless negotiation. Each breath, each flex of the hands and toes, each rotation of the torso was executed with precision, a calculated act of endurance. The snow was indifferent, but life clung fiercely to the fragile margins that still existed, fighting against suffocation and cold, stretching every possibility of survival to its absolute limit. The concept of time became meaningless in the avalanche's frozen grip. Seconds stretched and distorted, melting into minutes that felt like hours, and each hour became an eternity. There was no sun to mark its passage, no wind to signal a change, no familiar sound to provide orientation. The body existed in a singular, unbroken present, aware only of the relentless pressure, the suffocating density of the snow, and the fragile rhythm of each shallow breath. Time ceased to be measured in hours or minutes. It was measured in inhalations, heartbeats, and movements, each one a small victory over the crushing inevitability of the frozen mass. Every sensation was heightened, exaggerated by the confinement and the constant threat of suffocation. The chest expanded and contracted under pressure that seemed designed to crush every ounce of life, and each exhale carried away precious warmth along with the air. Tiny shifts in posture became monumental decisions. A twist of the torso, a flex of the wrist, even the slightest rotation of the head could open a precious pocket of air or seal it shut. The body learned to anticipate these micro-changes instinctively, guided by both fear and a desperate, primal focus on survival. The snow was alive in its own way, shifting imperceptibly with every breath, every shiver, every flex of limbs. It was not conscious, yet it moved with a rhythm that demanded constant attention. Pressure points changed as the snow settled, and the smallest variation could spell the difference between access to oxygen and suffocation. Fingers and toes probed, testing the density of the surrounding ice and powder, while the body adjusted the torso and chest with imperceptible rotations to take advantage of these minute shifts. Survival became a dance with physics, the negotiation between frozen weight and fragile air. Time was also defined by the body's physical responses. Heartbeat thundered in the ears, loud and insistent, while blood raced through veins like molten fire, struggling against the chill of the snow. Muscles trembled under tension and exertion, joints ached, and every fiber of the body was acutely aware of fatigue, cold, and the struggle for air. Yet the mind, even when overwhelmed by exhaustion, maintained a razor-sharp focus. Each breath, each movement, each mental calculation of pressure and potential air pockets was timed perfectly. Economies collapsed, and leaders had no words. Fear was omnipresent, a constant, simmering undercurrent that sharpened awareness rather than paralyzing action. Panic rose in waves but was harnessed, translated into hyper-awareness and precise micro-movements. Every twitch, every rotation, every contraction of muscles was dictated by a singular drive: endurance. The avalanche was indifferent. It did not pause, it did not falter, and it did not care. The only ally was the mind's capacity to anticipate, adapt, and exploit every minor fluctuation in the oppressive weight of snow. The passage of time was also marked by subtle changes in the snow itself. The surrounding mass was not uniform. Variations in density, texture, and structure became apparent only through touch, breath, and vibration. Fingers flexed, hands tested the edges of microcavities, and toes probed for shifts that might reveal new pockets of air. The chest expanded carefully, feeling for space, learning the rhythms of compression and settling. Awareness of these microdynamics became a method to stretch the finite supply of oxygen, to preserve energy, and to negotiate survival in an environment designed to extinguish life. Exertion became a strategic decision. Any sudden movement risked inhaling snow, overexerting muscles, or destabilizing the fragile balance of air pockets. Each action had to be measured, precisely timed with the shifting snow and the body's own needs for oxygen and warmth. The mind continuously assessed the cost and benefit of every twitch, every rotation, every effort. Even as the body weakened under cold and exhaustion, awareness of the smallest opportunities to act remained crucial. Survival was no longer about brute strength. It was about precision, timing, and the calculated use of every resource the body could summon. The cold was constant, gnawing at every exposed surface, seeping into the core and numbing the extremities. Muscles that once allowed ease of movement now rebelled with stiffness and cramps. Fingers and toes lost dexterity, making even the smallest adjustments laborious and taxing. Yet the body adapted, finding subtle compensations through instinct and careful maneuvering. Shivers were timed strategically to generate warmth without wasting energy, flexing and contracting muscles in calculated sequences to preserve life-sustaining heat. The battle was not just for air, but for the body's ability to function at all under the frozen pressure. The mind, forced to operate with such acute focus, began to perceive patterns in the snow's behavior. Shifts, vibrations, and subtle changes in pressure became signals, providing insight into how to adjust posture, flex limbs, and time breaths to maximize survival. Time, in this context, was no longer abstract. It was a series of intervals defined by physiological responses and environmental cues. Every heartbeat, every inhalation, every slight tremor in the snow became a measure of progress and opportunity. Awareness of these rhythms was critical, transforming fear into actionable intelligence and turning the body's limitations into strategic advantages. Isolation intensified the perception of time. There was no external reference, no horizon, no sunlight. The avalanche had erased everything familiar, leaving only the white, oppressive tomb and the self-contained rhythm of the body. Lungs expanded and contracted, muscles responded to instinct and calculated effort, and the mind monitored every vibration, every shift, every breath. Each moment was elongated, magnified by the intensity of confinement, and yet survival required constant engagement. The body could not rest, and the mind could not wander. Time existed solely as the sum of action, response, and endurance. The struggle was a continuous negotiation. Micro movements of hands and feet, slight rotations of the torso, subtle adjustments of the chest, each one influenced by time, by the shifting snow, by the fragile supply of oxygen, became acts of survival. Every breath was precious, every second a potential victory over the encroaching suffocation. The body learned to respond in near-perfect synchrony with the environment, reading the snow's imperceptible cues and adjusting instantaneously, each adjustment a negotiation with both time and physics. Energy was rationed instinctively. Shivering, trembling, and subtle contractions were measured against the need to preserve strength. Each micro movement was optimized to maintain warmth, access air pockets, and prolong the ability to act. Fatigue was inevitable, yet the body and mind compensated by focusing on the smallest achievable motions that yielded the greatest survival advantage. The avalanche imposed relentless pressure, yet life persisted through strategic, almost imperceptible adaptation. Even in the crushing confines, there was a strange awareness of continuity. Micro shifts in snow, fleeting air pockets, and the body's own cycles of effort and rest created a rhythm, a time measured in survival rather than minutes. The body became attuned to these rhythms, learning to act and pause with the precision of instinct reinforced by constant observation. Each second was stretched and leveraged, each inhalation exploited, every movement calculated to maintain life against the indifferent force surrounding it. Through all of this, the mind maintained a fragile equilibrium. Awareness, fear, calculation, and instinct merged into a single, continuous focus on survival. External markers of time were irrelevant. The body's internal rhythms and the snow's subtle cues became the only temporal references. Life existed in this feedback loop, a delicate balance of breath, movement, perception, and endurance. Every breath taken, every micro movement executed, every adjustment timed perfectly with the shifting snow, became a marker of the passage of time. The avalanche had obliterated conventional measures, yet survival defined a new temporal framework, one built entirely from physiological responses, instinctive calculations, and the continuous negotiation between body and environment. The present became eternal, defined by the urgent necessity of endurance, each moment a fragile triumph over suffocation, cold, and crushing weight. A tiny pocket of air appeared, almost imperceptible at first, a fragile gap in the overwhelming whiteness and pressure that surrounded the body. Its existence was fleeting, barely more than a hint, yet it carried immense significance. Each inhale became easier, though still laborious, and for the first time, the oppressive weight of suffocation seemed slightly negotiable. Awareness sharpened instantly. Every micro movement, every flex of a finger, Every rotation of the torso was now aimed at preserving this sliver of possibility. It was a lifeline, a fragile bridge between suffocation and survival, and every instinct focused entirely on maintaining it. The presence of air, however slight, ignited a surge of hope that was both exhilarating and terrifying. It was a reminder that life could persist even within the frozen prison of snow. Every breath was savored, drawn with careful calculation, lungs expanding against icy resistance, while the body adjusted minutely to preserve and expand the space. Micro shifts of limbs created imperceptible caverns, and the chest expanded with deliberate control, exploiting every fraction of available volume. This pocket of air was not merely survival. It was a spark, fragile yet undeniable, against the absolute indifference of the avalanche. The mind, sharpened by desperation, became acutely aware of the environment. The snow above and around was not static. It shifted subtly, responding to even the tiniest movement. Each inhalation and exhalation had to be timed to coincide with these shifts, ensuring that the fragile pocket of air was not destroyed. Fingers and toes pressed against compressed snow, testing its density, flexing muscles with careful intent. Every micro adjustment had consequences, and the smallest mistake could erase the hard-won space that allowed breathing, turning hope into immediate danger. Energy management became crucial. The body had been exhausted by hours of compression, cold, and restricted movement, yet the emergence of this air pocket demanded precise and efficient action. Every muscle contraction had to be purposeful, every twitch optimized to preserve both warmth and oxygen. The body learned to conserve energy while exploiting opportunity, creating a rhythm of delicate exertion and careful pause. Shivers were controlled, limbs flexed with intention, and breaths were synchronized with micro movements in the snow, all to maintain this fragile lifeline. Awareness of impermanence intensified focus. The air pocket could collapse at any moment, erased by the unrelenting pressure of the avalanche or a sudden shift in snow. Every micro movement was executed with the knowledge that this fragile gap was temporary, yet it was the difference between suffocation and life. Muscles contracted instinctively, chest expanded carefully, and subtle rotations of the torso maximized every millimeter of space. Survival became a negotiation with the snow, and the pocket of air represented both a prize and a responsibility. The body responded with remarkable adaptability. Lungs expanded against resistance, drawing air deep, while extremities adjusted minutely to relieve pressure and stabilize the surrounding snow. Fingers dug carefully, probing the compressed mass for weaknesses that could enlarge the cavity. Toes flexed, shifting weight slightly to create additional micro space. Even the smallest adjustment could increase survival chances, and the body executed these movements with near-perfect synchronization of instinct, calculation, and endurance. Cold remained an adversary. It gnawed at fingers and toes, stole warmth from muscles, and made each movement more difficult. Yet the presence of air infused a renewed urgency. Every flex, every rotation, every cautious exertion was amplified by the possibility of survival. The body adapted to the cold by leveraging subtle movement to generate micro-heat, using it to maintain circulation and function while minimizing energy expenditure. The combination of instinct and environmental awareness allowed for survival in conditions that were otherwise relentlessly hostile. Mental resilience became as important as physical adaptability. Panic had to be restrained, fear channeled into precise, purposeful action. The mind observed, calculated, and guided movements to maintain access to air. Every shift in snow, every vibration transmitted through frozen ice, every subtle change in pressure was noted and used to inform the next adjustment. Hope, fragile and flickering, provided the drive to act, transforming desperation into strategic endurance. It became clear that survival depended as much on maintaining focus and presence of mind as on strength or flexibility. The faintest sound of shifting snow became a critical signal. A small creak, a subtle slide of powder, could indicate a shift in the surrounding ice, threatening the fragile pocket of air or, conversely, hinting at a potential expansion. The body responded instantaneously, adjusting posture, flexing muscles, and maximizing chest expansion to coincide with these micro-events. Each inhalation was timed, each movement synchronized, creating a dynamic interaction with the environment. The avalanche, vast and indifferent, could not be controlled, but every micro-adjustment increased the probability of survival within this confined, frozen tomb. Hope began to manifest physically. Muscles tensed with renewed purpose, lungs expanded deeper, and subtle rotations of limbs became more confident. The body was exhausted but willing to act with precision, leveraging instinct and observation to exploit every possible opportunity. Each careful inhalation reinforced determination. Every measured exhale strengthened resolve. The pocket of air was both a sanctuary and a challenge, demanding respect, attention, and strategic action. Even small victories became monumental. The discovery of a slightly larger cavity, a minor shift that allowed deeper inhalation, or a subtle rotation that created additional space. Each was celebrated internally as proof that survival remained possible. Every success, no matter how minor, reinforced the necessity of persistence. The mind mapped these gains, committing them to instinctual memory for future reference, ensuring that the body could continue to exploit opportunities as they arose. The avalanche remained an ever-present threat. The weight of snow above pressed relentlessly, indifferent to effort, fatigue, or determination. Yet the emergence of this air pocket transformed the environment from an inescapable tomb into a battlefield of opportunity. The body navigated the confines carefully, exploiting the space, adjusting posture, flexing extremities, and synchronizing movements with both instinct and observation. Survival became a careful choreography of breath, motion, and awareness, guided by the knowledge that life persisted within the tiny pocket of air. Every inhalation, every measured shift, every subtle flex of muscle became a tangible assertion of life. The snow, immense and indifferent, continued its slow, crushing presence, yet within the fragile gap, air moved, lungs expanded, and endurance persisted. The body and mind operated as a unified force, balancing strength, calculation, and instinct in a continuous negotiation with the surrounding ice. Hope, delicate yet persistent, infused every action with purpose, transforming desperation into effective strategy and sustaining life in a world designed to erase it. Even the smallest adjustments had profound impact. A tilt of the head, a rotation of the torso, or a flex of the fingers could enlarge the pocket, allow a deeper breath, or stabilize the surrounding snow. Each movement was executed with acute awareness of risk and opportunity, balancing potential gains against the ever-present threat of collapse. Energy was rationed instinctively, every exertion optimized to maximize survival. Hope fueled these actions, providing a focus that allowed the body to endure and adapt despite exhaustion and cold. The snow pressed with unyielding force, yet the body exploited the infinitesimal spaces where life could persist. Every inhalation, every exhale, every micro movement became an act of negotiation with the avalanche. The pocket of air was a fragile sanctuary, providing the most basic of necessities while demanding vigilance, precision, and endurance. Survival was not guaranteed, but possibility existed, and that possibility became the driving force, transforming fear into determination, exhaustion into calculated action, and despair into focus. Hope, the weight of the snow was suffocating, relentless, pressing down with a force that seemed insurmountable. Every breath was a struggle, lungs fighting to expand against icy resistance, chest compressed under the unyielding mass above. Yet within this frozen prison, a flicker of determination persisted. Each inhalation became a deliberate act of survival, each exhale a calculated release, balancing the need for oxygen against the risk of destabilizing the fragile equilibrium of snow surrounding the body. Movement was cautious but necessary. Fingers flexed against the solidified layers, probing for softer patches, microcavities, or any slight change in density. Toes shifted subtly, adjusting weight to relieve pressure and create minute openings. The torso rotated with painstaking precision, chest expanding just enough to capture the thinnest sliver of air. Every action, no matter how small, carried profound consequence. Miscalculation could collapse the fragile pocket of oxygen or force inhalation of snow, yet inaction could allow exhaustion and cold to take their toll. Survival demanded a meticulous choreography of breath, movement, and instinct. Cold penetrated every layer of flesh, stealing warmth from extremities and sapping strength from already fatigued muscles. Fingers went numb, joints stiffened, and shivering became almost constant. Yet adaptation occurred instinctively. Controlled contractions of muscles, subtle rotations, and flexing of extremities generated micro-heat, maintaining function and circulation while conserving precious energy. Every motion became a balance between generating warmth, preserving oxygen, and maintaining the delicate micro-cavities that allowed life to continue. Awareness sharpened to an extreme degree. The faintest vibrations of shifting snow, subtle temperature changes, and imperceptible variations in pressure were analyzed continuously. Heartbeat, pulse, and the rhythm of breathing became crucial indicators guiding micro-adjustments to preserve air, reduce strain, and stabilize the surrounding snow. Even minor sensations tingling in fingertips, pressure changes on the chest, or vibrations in the torso provided critical information that could mean the difference between survival and suffocation. Time was a fluid concept, stretched and distorted by the intensity of the environment. Seconds felt like hours, minutes blended into eternity, and awareness of external reality faded completely. Survival was measured not by hours, but by the succession of microactions. Breaths drawn, fingers flexed, torso rotated, and toes shifted. Each successful adjustment was a milestone, each minor success a proof of continued existence. The body operated in a continuous loop of observation, calculation, and movement, fully engaged in the singular mission of life preservation. Hope persisted in fragile increments, fueled by tiny successes. The discovery of a slightly larger air pocket, a minor reduction in pressure, or a subtle softening of the snow became monumental victories. These fleeting moments reinforced determination, sharpening focus and guiding subsequent micro-movements. Awareness of possibility became a driving force, converting fear and exhaustion into strategic action. Each inhalation carried not just oxygen, but a renewed sense of resolve, a reminder that survival was still possible even within the frozen tomb. Breathing required constant vigilance. Each inhalation had to be timed precisely with the natural shifts of the snow, avoiding sudden expansions that could destabilize the delicate pockets of air. Exhalation had to be controlled to prevent loss of warmth and oxygen, yet it was essential to maintain pressure balance. The chest expanded carefully, torso rotated minutely, and extremities flexed to optimize space. Survival was no longer about brute strength, but about precision, awareness, and calculated risk. Every movement mattered, each one a negotiation with the unyielding avalanche. Exertion was carefully rationed. Sudden or forceful movements could collapse the fragile air pockets, while complete stillness could allow hypothermia or exhaustion to take hold. The body adapted, executing only the most efficient, minimal motions necessary to maintain survival. Lungs expanded with controlled effort, fingers and toes probed precisely, and the torso rotated subtly to create and preserve pockets of breathable air. Each action was intentional, executed with the awareness that life depended on the perfect balance between movement and conservation. Adjustments became second nature. Fingers pressed gently into the snow to test for weaker layers. Toes shifted weight incrementally to relieve pressure, and the torso rotated subtly to take advantage of air pockets. Even minute rotations of the head could expand breathing space or optimize posture. Each adjustment was informed by a combination of instinct, observation, and experience, creating a dynamic interaction with the avalanche. The body operated as a finely tuned system, continuously negotiating pressure, oxygen, and temperature to prolong life. Fear was a constant companion, yet it was harnessed into focus. Panic was present but managed, converted into a tool for heightened awareness. Every vibration, sound, or change in the environment was interpreted as information to guide survival strategy. Instinct and conscious calculation worked in tandem, ensuring that each movement, each inhalation, each flex of muscle maximized the chances of maintaining life. The frozen tomb demanded vigilance, yet within it, life persisted through focus, precision, and resilience. Even the tiniest victories became monumental. A slightly deeper breath, a minor rotation of the torso, or a subtle shift in weight provided not just physical benefit, but psychological reinforcement. Each success, however minor, reinforced determination, sharpened focus, and validated the continuous effort to survive. The mind recorded these successes, translating them into instinctual knowledge that guided future actions. Even in extreme isolation and under crushing weight, the body learned, adapted, and optimized every opportunity to breathe, move, and endure. Energy management was critical. Pauses allowed partial recovery, subtle shivers generated warmth, and each rotation or flex of the torso conserved strength while maintaining air access. Exhaustion was mitigated by careful pacing, balancing energy output with opportunity for life, preserving movement. Awareness of the body's limits, coupled with strategic use of energy, allowed survival in an environment that demanded absolute precision. Hope, fragile but persistent, fueled these calculated adaptations, driving continued endurance despite overwhelming odds. The snow was relentless, yet life persisted in infinitesimal increments. Fingers probed, toes flexed, and the torso rotated continuously to preserve and expand pockets of air. Awareness of subtle changes, vibration, temperature, pressure guided each action, allowing the body to negotiate survival with almost surgical precision. Even as energy waned and the cold pressed ever more insistently, the drive to survive remained undiminished, converting desperation into a continuous, calculated effort to breathe, move, and endure. Each breath taken was both a physical necessity and a psychological victory. Lungs expanded against resistance, chest rotated with precision, and extremities adjusted to stabilize the surrounding snow. Survival became a dynamic interplay between instinct, awareness, and deliberate action. Every movement, every carefully timed inhalation, and every flex of muscle was a negotiation with the avalanche, a test of endurance, and a statement that life would not be extinguished without relentless struggle. Pockets of air became arenas of survival. Each successful expansion of chest or rotation of the torso preserved life, while each subtle adjustment of fingers and toes maintained structural stability within the snow. The body adapted continuously, leveraging instinct and observation to optimize every motion. Even exhaustion and cold could not fully diminish the precision with which movements were executed. Survival depended on this delicate balance, and hope persisted within every breath and every successful adjustment. The avalanche pressed with unyielding force, yet life endured within the infinitesimal spaces carved by movements, careful rotations, and precise inhalations. Awareness of every vibration, every shift, every subtle change in air pressure allowed continuous negotiation for survival. Hope, fragile yet persistent, provided the drive to act, transforming fear into focus, exhaustion into strategy, and despair into relentless, purposeful endurance. Even the smallest victories were magnified by their importance. A slightly larger air pocket, a minor rotation, or a shift in weight became proof that survival remained possible. Each success reinforced determination, focus, and the ability to exploit fleeting opportunities. Life persisted in these infinitesimal increments, sustained by precise action, awareness, and an unyielding drive to breathe, move, and endure in the face of overwhelming odds.